Testing. Testing.
Oh, sorry. Hello. Well, okay. We're waiting on Alain and Cécile. And until then, I noticed we have a few fresh faces, and I'm going to, if you don't mind, me ask if they can introduce themselves. Is that okay? Is that kosher? All right. I know Jonathan. Hi, Jonathan. And to your right, we have, that's Todd Mercer, a freelance writer. Thank you. Welcome. And do you mind introducing yourself? And Thomas, and where are you from? So are you a fellow at Oxford? Fantastic. Welcome. Sorry, would you like to introduce yourself too? I know, but for this crowd. Steve Walters from Grand Rapids. Right. The acoustics in here are, but yes, I know, but I wanted him to. Okay, great. Any other new faces? Great. Well,
Testing.
Just to kill some time, this will be the last event. Tonight we can just chill out and be with each other in fellowship, like we have been the past few nights. Those of you who are taking it for credit, we will need to meet in a formal setting online in our normal platform venue. So we can talk about that through the Facebook group. Yes.
Yeah, program that says tweeting and Roundtable.
That's right. Yes, and that's where we'll fellowship. Can I call it that? Is that too weird? Okay, great.
So just one more thing is because I just want people to remember that we have people coming in from around the world online also. So everybody's here in the room, but they're also online, and so that's why we need to use the mic. It's not that we couldn't hear each other. We surely could, but so I'm just going to pass or just leave this in the rest of the group, and so that way we have one for the panel members and one that can be passed around to the other people too. That way the people online can hear you and whatnot.
Jason, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah.
How's it going?
Great.
Is that going to be Alain's earphone? Or I mean microphone?
That's a good question. Maybe he should. I was thinking.
I can pass this.
I was thinking we would just.
I can pass this around to myself. The multiple returns upon itself. No, but I can walk around for people.
And just pass it.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So I'm going to leave this one here.
Great. Okay, great. So just for those of you who are new here, and actually I invited several people off the street to come. So let's see if they emerge or not. But this is a seminar sponsored by the Global Center for Advanced Studies, and we are debt-free graduate education with the best minds in the world. And Jason Adams and I started organizing it, and now it's we've formalized, and this is really our first concrete seminar done by, of course, our most inspired thinker who gave us the courage to do this. And I think that you will agree with me that the seminar this week has been nothing less than just exhilarating, penetrating, entertaining, humorous. So it's been really amazing. So, okay, Hello, Alan. Okay, so we're going to do this very quickly, within 45 minutes or less, and this is a roundtable, and I'm going to introduce the speakers, and then the speakers will have 3 minutes, and I'm going to be a Stalinist about it. 3 minutes, done, and then so that Alan can talk and give us his insights. Okay, so I'm Creston. I'm the moderator. You know that. We will first start out with Professor Kelly from Aquinas College. She is a professor of philosophy. She specializes in critical thinking. She actually wrote a textbook of critical thinking. She's also a poet, as we saw this morning. And thank you for being here. The next panelist will be Dr. Jason Adams. Actually, Jason has 2 doctorates, one from the European Graduate School, one from the University of Hawaii. Jason taught at Williams College, considered the most elite liberal arts college in America. And Jason is the co-director of the Global Center for Advanced Studies, and he co-founded the Global Center for Advanced Studies with me. And then Professor Asfar Hussain is a professor. He's our vice president and also a professor at Grand Valley State University. And of course, do I need to introduce the master thinker of our time, Alain Badiou. Okay, so we'll start with Professor Kelly. Would you mind?
What I would like to address in Professor Badiou's work ethics is the question of whether we in postmodernity can still benefit from applying a human rights or political rights perspective as a valuable political theory for resolving our conflicts of interest. The problem with Badiou's, and I would argue just about everybody else's approach to applying a human rights perspective, is that they fail to use both prongs of the formula or the conceptual framework that a philosophy of human rights can offer to resolve conflict. Number one, address the question of how central or vital the interests at stake are to personhood. Badiou wondered whether the concept of humanity, that's the foundation of human rights, is adequate or has been adequately conceptualized to do the work we expect out of a theory of political rights. We know that the foundation of rights talk is Kantian, with the conception of personhood being that of rational autonomy in a center of consciousness and occupy the position of moral worth and human dignity. Past that, any decision to validate a particular individual or group's rights is based on addressing first, how vital or central are the interests at stake to personhood? And second, what are the particular power differentials between the groups who are experiencing this conflict? I think the failure to address the first question or achieve a satisfactory answer to the first question is pretty much what Badiou has pointed out. These discussions have occurred in the context of capitalism and liberalism, both of which have heavily focused on the conception of persons as individuals and a conception of the most important central human interest being that of private property. And I would argue that appealing to a political theory of human rights offers us an opportunity to engage in a Habermasian dialogue with all the relevant stakeholders, providing an authentic interpretation of their needs vis-a-vis the particular context. That has never been done adequately. If right to private property has dominated the discussion. More? Okay, so if we had a distinction between positive and negative rights, negative rights is pretty much where we're at in the United States. The right to life being the right not to be killed, maimed, injured, but a positive right to life would involve our society providing all the resources to live a livable life. Food, shelter, education, and opportunities to do creative, productive work.
Yes, it would be, in fact, a long and difficult discussion. Because my vision is not at all that there exists something like a Pacific Arena where we can discuss concerning human rights between people with are animated by a goodwill. It's not at all my vision. My vision is that the power is in the hands of a small oligarchy, and that this small oligarchy wants to keep this power for eternity. And by at any price is with enemies. So we are not in an Habermasian situation where we have a peaceful discussion with rational animals. No, we are in hard struggle, sometimes open, sometimes more hidden, but with a field of politics when what exists is enemies. So after that, we can have the discussion concerning, in fact, the rights. What are the really acceptable means in the field of the political fight? Question of violence, question of discussion, question of unity, but all that in the idea that we cannot have the possibility to convince the enemies that we are good and they are bad. It's not at all their vision. They are the vision, aristocratic vision of domination, domination forever, by material means, with army, police, and after, beyond all that, the possession of capital. We are in a world, you know, where 10% of the people dispose of more than 88 part of common meal. So it's not at all a democratic situation, not at all. Democracy has, for its only signification today, to organize the consensus about and around the fact that in the real, the situation is an oligarchic one and not a democratic one. So it is a democracy in favor of oligarchy. It's a paradoxical situation, but it's the situation. And it's possible only because the world is divided in a part with, in some sense, some possibility to distribution to practically everybody, some part of the richesse. Yes, yes. And another part of humanity where practically people have nothing. You know that today, exactly 50%, so of the total population have strictly nothing at all. Nothing at all. Nothing at all. So it's not a peaceful situation. It's a dramatic one. And in this dramatic situation, we must find the way of emancipation. Under a basis, we cannot be the strictly peaceful vision of a trial of human rights. Okay. But we can continue the discussion during a long time.
In next 3 minutes, Dr. Jason Adams, Professor Adams.
Okay, so my question has to do with your essay, "Cinema as a Democratic Emblem," which was appeared in Monthly Review and a few other places. The reason I want to bring this up is because that essay, we were actually interviewed by the Huffington Post when we started the Global Center for Advanced Studies, and I cited that essay as one of our kind of conceptual inspirations, because there was a formulation in there that I found very, very interesting, where you were talking about the role of various mediums, various types of media in the development of the arts on the one hand, and in the development of kind of developing a mass consciousness on the other. And in that essay, you said you essentially said that the really interesting thing about cinema is that cinema developed in the exact same time as the development of avant-garde art, of contemporary avant-gardes within art. Yet at the same time, which is kind of an elite affair. It's a kind of a not necessarily very democratic type of affair. Whereas cinema is, as a medium, is really kind of developed in a way that really reaches large masses of people. So, and basically what I took from that in the interview, I described what I called, you basically said it, obviously, it wasn't me, but I basically made the conjunction the mass avant-garde. And I said that this is also what the Global Center for Advanced Studies is trying to do. We're using the internet, we're using online communication, we're using any medium we can to be able to be a global institution. But then the thought that we're using is essentially high theory. So, so I was just wondering if you could comment a little bit on why is it important to both have the mass and to have the avant-garde? Why was it important to you for those things to come together?
Yes, in some sense, it's not a problem for me, all that. I think that at any stage of history, there exists new means of communication and new means of expression and so on. First, yes, written print, after that, radio, television, internet, and so on. And all that can be new means for emancipation too. I don't think that by itself some technological means are bad or are in the an instrument of enemies. Naturally, all can be, all can be, but it's not a necessity. It's not a necessity. And so you must be really thinking about the possible use of all that for new ideas, new forms of political organization, and so on. And it's a necessity because when some technological means exist, we cannot return before their existence. It's impossible. When you have a telegraph, you cannot go before. It's impossible. And it's the same thing when you have guns. We cannot return before with these words. So Lenin was saying that in some sense technology is beyond difference of classes. And it's only that it's impossible to return before. So it's a necessity to find the new use, possible use of new means of communication, expression, and so on. And when one form of expression or communication becomes really something for the mass, that is the case for cinema during all the next century, you must attempt to use this mass determination of one form of art for emancipation, revolution, new ideas, and and also work of art, new work of art, of universal nature. So I have no problem with technology as such. Technology is always the creation of new possibilities. New possibilities for everybody. So for the enemies too, and first, because they have financial means and so on. But we have many examples for revolutionary use of theater, Bertolt Brecht, with revolutionary use of cinema, with Eisenstein and many others. And we must have many new use of internet and so on for emancipation and revolution. On the other side, internet is also a very important technology for police and spy.
Thank you. And our last intervention is by Professor Asfar Hussain.
Thank you, Kristen. And I have 3 questions in 3 minutes. And initially, I wanted to ask questions. Initially, I wanted to ask questions about Marx's mathematical manuscripts and Maoist poems, but I have kept them aside because I have received some questions from some of our comrades from South Asia. And on the basis of those questions, I've very quickly formulated 3 questions. And it's not really well formulated, but I will try. My first question, Professor Badiou, concerns what you said to me over lunch the day before yesterday. You said, I quote, "The future of humanity does not lie in the Western world, but in the global South," unquote. Would you please elaborate on that? Should I? Would you? Yeah, should we?
Oh, it's a very simple idea, in fact. We know perfectly that today the Western world is at the progressive end of its power. It has been the creation of mondial power with colonialism and so on, and today with the leadership of United States. But all that cannot invent something new. All that is the world as it is, but not the world as it becomes. And from a point of view of classical Marxism, we observe that the great mass of proletariat in the global south today, there are in China some factories with millions of workers. It's practically at an other scale that all was possible in Western world. And so the destiny of humanity will be one day in the issue of political fight in the global south, certainly.
And second question, speaking at a symposium in support of the Freedom Theater at the Church of St. Paul the Apostle in New York City in October of 2010, you said, I quote, "Peace lies inside the existence of Palestinian people. Peaceful, affirmative existence. This is why there is something universal in Palestinian existence," unquote. Again, I would ask you to elaborate on this for our comrades who ask this question.
I think that the situation in Palestine and in Israel is a sort of symbol of the general situation of humanity today. Because we have something like a line of front between two worlds. And this line of front is naturally like a paradigmatic situation for everybody. And I think the issue must be peace. Not destruction of one by the other. Not destruction of Jews by Palestinians. Nor destruction of Palestinians by Jews. But the creation of a new country. A new peaceful country with the two people. And it will be a success for the humanity as such, and not only a local success for the Palestinian situation. Because it will be the proof that with two completely different histories, with two completely different religions, with the two different worlds finally, something like a part of Western world and something like a part of global South, with terrible differences, we can create new form of peace and unity. And this is the reason what the situation in Palestine is, in some sense, a universal situation. Not only the situation for the people who are here, naturally, first, but the situation for the becoming of humanity in general.
Thank you. And just can't resist mentioning that France has just banned, the French government has just banned today pro-Palestinian demonstrations. So my third question and last question is my question, and I'm just curious, and I might be wrong here also. Correct me if I'm wrong. In your lectures, you mentioned the Algerian colonial war. More than once, of course. You didn't just mention, you talked about them. We know one of the political parties you founded in France was active.
With the microphone with your voice. So don't hold it over here while you're talking like that.
So what should I do?
Hold the mic in front of your voice.
Okay, I will do that. I will try. So one of the... Okay, don't move. This is totally conditioned by the technology. I get the impression that we do not just simply use technology, but technology also uses us. So one of the political parties you founded in France was active in the struggle for decolonization in Algeria. Now, with the exception of one of your masters, Jean-Paul Sartre, prominent 20th century French philosophers and theorists, particularly including Deleuze and Foucault and Derrida, their varying degrees of interest in the Algerian national movement notwithstanding, remained either silent about or didn't care to take up Frantz Fanon's work seriously. Cecile mentioned Frantz Fanon. It was Kwame Nkrumah, a whole constellation of theorists. Of course! So I'm curious, I mean, what is going on here actually? Or do you have any work that engages the work of Frantz Fanon? Just curious.
You know, it's also a consideration of chronology. The Algerian war is finished in 1962. So the great audience of the philosophers you name is some years after. Maybe, for example, the great books of Derrida are in 1967. And we are in a completely different situation. Progressively, the question of the Algerian war, the question of colonialism more generally, enter in a sequence of where something like that is not present. Something. It was not a positive fact. It was not a positive fact, but it's a fact. France, my country, was in the idea to completely forget the Algerian war as a bad memory. And many of us contribute to this point, not in an unconscious manner. And this is why Frantz Fanon has not been recognized as it was necessary. And personally, I perfectly know the work of Frantz Fanon, but it was some like a part of my general relationship to Algerian war by the mediation of Sartre, finally. And so the famous preface of Sartre to the book of Frantz Fanon has been my Bible. But it was because I am a little older than the others, and so I was much more inside the fight concerning the Algerian war than the others. So you can give them our pardon to their negligence concerning Frantz Fanon, because the practical context, the real context, was in some sense different.
Thank you. Thank you much.
Okay, now at this point, what we're going to do is have Alain just, in the last couple minutes here, just reflect upon his own experience here, if he has any insights. And Ciso, I invite you also to, if you want, to reflect upon this, if at all.
It was for me really some days of great interest. And it was for me a pleasure to be here with you, really. It's not only to be polite. And I think you know that it's a proof for me that it's possible in any context to organize something, maybe maybe little, maybe more important. It's not the point. It's a qualitative question. Is it possible to organize something in the direction of free discussion of new philosophical and political orientation? And it's a proof for me of the point I was saying this morning, that United States is a good place for the search of exception. That is the possibility, that sort of assembly, and is not really possible in France today. In France, we can have much more meetings and so on. And we can have, for example, my seminar with, you find hundreds and hundreds of people. But I know that the subjective interest is not the same. It's much more something snob, if you want. Yes, I have seen Badiou, and you say that in the saloon and in the discussion, the private discussion. I was in the seminar in Badiou this year, and you know. I know perfectly. And when I am in front of the audience, you or my seminar, I know the difference. I see the difference. I know that the assembly here is really with personal attention what is said, and that is something like a novelty, something which must be criticized, but something vivid. And when I speak in Paris with many people, it's not exactly the same. I know that they are here for me, but in some sense like if I was a rock star. But I am not. And so they come, it's a pleasure, it's a spectacle, but after that, the consequences, I don't know. Maybe no consequence at all. A subjective satisfaction. You know? And it is why I agree with your decision to constitute a group, a school, here. I am at your disposition to do that because it's something else. It's something else. It's something like the promise of a process, the promise of the true discussion, a promise of something which is really in connection with ideology and organization. Not immediately, but something which prepare the discussion in this direction. And so, thank you to all of you.
I want to thank you also. I perfectly agree with what Alain was just saying. And for me, it's a very interesting and beautiful meeting. I can say a kind of generic situation, as it told, and it's very interesting. So, and also I agree that we could have such a meeting right now in France. That means our situation is bad. And also the paper I read yesterday, my paper, I could publish in French, for sure. So the use of this paper is just to give from hand to hand to comrades. And by example, I give it to few of my patients at the hospital. So it's I think a beautiful diagonal like that to do such a work, very little, but hand by hand to any workers in France, because my patients, they are hardworking people. Generally, they work on building, you know, or they are housemaids, like that. Okay. So this is a beautiful diagonal, I think, and that's really real militant work, as I understand it. So thank you so much.
If you have a question, I think Professor Badiou might have a few. Just actually, we're done. So the reason is he needs to do filming and things of that sort for the film that Jason and is doing. So that's it for us. Thank you so much for being part of GCAS.